Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we have a very laid back conversation. I didn't script any of this. I just want to take a look at this letter from the administrator of Oslo and Bacon. Well, we have some great news of Watchtower from Norway. They already lost their religious registration. So Jehovah's Witnesses in Norway are no longer registered as a religion. Let me tell you why this is excellent news and what it means exactly. Sit back, relax. I'm having a cup of coffee here. We're just going to look over this letter and pretty much say the highlights of the event and what it means for Jehovah's Witnesses in Norway in the near future. Thank you guys. I just ask you to leave a like as always. Thank you for your support. Let's get to it. So this case is a year in the making. It goes back all the way to January 27, 2022, in which the state administrator of Norway basically refused grant for Jehovah's Witnesses of 2021. So how this works is that Norway basically gives free money to the registered religions in the country. So depending on how many members a religion has, that amounts to the money they receive. So if a religion has a few members, they receive just a few thousand euros. If they have a lot, they receive millions of euros. And Watchtower for 2021 was projected to receive from the government around 1.5 million euros. And they're not really that big in the country. I think it's only around 20,000 Jehovah's Witnesses in Norway. If I'm correct, I'll put the right number here, but that's a lot of money. And we can understand why Watchtower was clearly upset by the loss of these state funds. Now, for a religion to receive this government, is basically a subsidy. They have to fulfill certain requirements by the state. So no religion is legally entitled to receive this money. They have to earn it, basically. And how do you earn it? Well, by treating your members humanely. So what was the problem? The problem was that both the state administrator and the Ministry of Children and Families saw that there was some troubling practices in the Jehovah's Witnesses that involved children. What do we mean exactly? So here in Section 6 of the Religious Communities Act, we see that if a faith or belief community or individuals acting on behalf of the community use violence or coercion, make threats, violate children's rights, violate statutory prohibitions on discrimination, or in other ways seriously violate the rights and freedoms of others, the community may be denied a grant or the grant may be curtailed. So yeah, basically if you use coercion or violence to your members, you're gonna lose the subsidy. So we see that Norway gave an opportunity to Jehovah's Witnesses to change their troubling practices that violated this particular amendment. And Jehovah's Witnesses basically said, we want to make it absolutely clear that Jehovah's Witnesses are not going to change their religious beliefs and practices in Norway in response to the state administrator's decision. So basically, hell no, we're not going to change anything about our doctrine or practices, but we still want that money. And Norway basically said, hell no, that's not gonna happen. So this entire letter is basically a documentation of Watchtower's responses, trying to excuse shunning and saying, well, it's not that bad. You know, they give examples, they cherry picking in their publications, trying to basically trick the courts into believing that shunning is not that bad and that it's optional and that there is no coercion involved. So they basically cherry pick from their own publications and try to trick the courts. For example, taking this quote, those who were baptized as Jehovah's Witnesses but no longer preach to others, perhaps even drifting away from association with fellow believers, are not shunned. We do not automatically disfellowship someone who commits a serious sin. If, however, a baptized witness makes a practice of breaking the Bible's moral code and does not repent, he or she will be shunned or disfellowshipped. This practice is based on the teachings of the Bible. All Jehovah's Witnesses accept to live by these standards when they make a well-considered choice to be baptized. So that was what Jehovah's Witnesses brought to the courts, basically saying, no, our members are not shunned if they drift away from the congregation. But of course, as former Jehovah's Witnesses, we know that in this instance, they're talking about members that faded away, inactive members, not disfellowshipped ones. So they're being very dishonest here, trying to lie to the courts. But the great thing is that the government of Norway actually did their research, and they went even to the Organized to Do Jehovah's Will book, and they basically did their homework. They saw quotes that made it very clear that members could not talk at all to disfellowship members. And they also discovered that a member that voluntarily decides to leave, to walk away, to withdraw their membership, that is, someone who disassociates themselves, is treated exactly the same way as someone who is disfellowshipped. So they saw right through that. The consequence of leaving the congregation is that the person concerned is no longer allowed to have contact with family and friends in the congregation. The religious community is clear that members should have no contact with disfellowshipped members. As we see in the section above, this also applies to members who have disassociated. This practice can mean that members feel pressure to remain in the religious community. Now that's a very, very key point. So the problem is that Jehovah's Witnesses are using coercion to keep their members in because they don't allow any members to talk to ex-members, and this basically creates fear and keeps people in, coerces them to stay in and not leave, because if they leave, they know they're gonna lose their family and friends. Now, as ex-members, we all know this is very common, but Watchtower really tried to pull the rug under Norway and try to make an excuse for their doctrines, but Norway saw right through it, and they saw that this was a basically violation of human rights. I quote, "If a member of Jehovah's Witnesses changes their religious beliefs and wishes to leave the religious community, the person concerned shall, according to the above, be treated as if they were disfellowshipped. This means that the members can no longer have contact with family and friends in the religious community without this having consequences for the remaining members. We refer to Shepherd the Flock of God, the Secret Elders book. In our opinion, this practice constitutes a form of sanctioning of both former members and remaining members. Against this background, the religious community has not ensured that a withdrawal can take place unconditionally and without obstacles from the religious community side." Yeah, so Watchtower is basically keeping people in through coercion by the disfellowshipping practice. We all know this, and now at this point Norway is very aware of it as well, and they're not gonna let it go. Now, I found this part very fascinating. I quote, "Since our decision on January 27, 2022, we have received several inquiries from members and former members of Jehovah's Witnesses. Among these are inquiries from members who support the practice of Jehovah's Witnesses and who disagree with the decision." So basically, JW apologists. "And from members who state that they want to leave the religious community but choose to stay because they do not want to break with family and friends. The latter group of members say that their choice to leave the congregation will mean that friends and family cannot have contact with them, even if they leave the congregation voluntarily and not because of disfellowshipping. They state that this is what makes them stay in the congregation. They also say that Jehovah's Witnesses encourage members to keep an eye on each other and inform the elders, the management," I love that they said the management, "if they know that someone in the religious community is in contact with disassociated or disfellowship persons." Yep, basically a police state. Watchtower is a police state. It's like the elders are like the Gestapo or the KGB. We've all known this, but now, thanks to these brave individuals who sent their concerns to Norway, Norway is like, oh, well, this organization actually has hundreds of captive members who want to leave but cannot because they're being coerced by Watchtower. And not only that, but they have also created a culture of snitching where members are encouraged to snitch others out if they're having contact with disfellowship persons. I know this is very toxic, but at this point, disfellowshipping is what keeps this religion from falling apart. So that's why Watchtower does not want to go away with it. Now, in the second part, the second factor that led to their loss of subsidy money, Norway says that children's rights were violated by the exercise of negative social control of children in the congregation, including the disfellowshipping rules of underage baptized children. So they're also saying, these negative consequences are not limited to adults, but they're also affecting children. Because as we know, the Organized to Do Jehovah's Will book, used by elders, is saying that even if a person is a minor, if they commit a sin that requires disfellowshipping, they're also going to be shunned as adults. So basically, they're going to be put on a trial that is meant for adults. So yeah, it's wrong. And remember that some children are getting baptized as young as 8 years old, 10 years old. So they're going to be sat down and they might be disfellowshipped for whatever reason. And Watchtower wants to put out the image that people are only disfellowshipped if they're not repentant, if they made a big mistake and they're not repentant. But we know in practice that is not the case. Sometimes elders disfellowship people even if they're repentant, even if they confessed firsthand. I personally seen it happen multiple times, and I'm sure you have as well. So yeah, all of this is basically a huge violation of human rights. Even further, Norway also realized that even children that were not baptized, unbaptized publishers, could also be subject to shunning and being ostracized by the congregation in the case that they lost this so-called privilege of being a publisher. So yeah, people are being shunned, and sometimes they were never even baptized. It goes up to that point. And this is a very detailed letter. You can check it out on the link below. I provided in the description. But Norway just keeps giving example after example, quoting from more Watchtower articles and books, basically stating their case, because Norway did not pull this case out of their ass, and they actually did their homework, and they saw that disfellowshipping had very negative consequences on both children and adults, and especially in the family bond. I quote, "The fact that a religious community violates its members' rights to freedom of expression and thus violates the right of freedom of religion is considered particularly serious. The same applies to the negative social control of children, which violates children's human rights protection under the Convention on the Rights of the Child. However, as the preparations for the religious community regulations indicate, the state administrator must, even in the case of serious violations, check whether the community has taken measures to prevent the violations from continuing." So, Norway is basically being very patient. They have been very patient for 1 entire year. They have given Watchtower ample space, ample time to change these issues, these violations. But Watchtower simply refused to. And you know that Watchtower loves money. So, why? Is it because they hold so firmly to their interpretation of the Bible? Is it because of their seal? Or is it because that they know that disfellowshipping is a very useful tool in keeping members in? Maybe it's a little bit of both. But Watchtower voluntarily refusing money in favor of keeping their practices alive really tells you how deluded they are in their own convictions. It's quite disturbing. And this has to be the cherry on the cake. Watchtower sent basically a last minute letter on December 2, 2022. They hired a big shot lawyer, Anders Risdal, to basically tell the state, oh, please delay on your implementation of our loss of registration. So basically, oh, please don't do this yet. We're not going to change your practices, but please delay a few months before you implement it. But Norway say, no, that's not going to happen. And Watchtower basically wasted thousands of dollars on this big shot lawyer for nothing. Again, this dude probably saw a golden opportunity and he took it. So yeah, Watchtower is no longer registered as a religion in Norway. So what does this mean? Are they gonna lose their freedom of worship? Or are they gonna be banned from the country like in Russia? Not at all. Loss of registration simply means that they do not receive state money and that they don't have the right to marry other people. So basically, elders cannot marry their members, their brothers and sisters in the Kingdom Hall anymore. That's it. The big deal is about this, apparent, and the money, of course. The money is the most important. But yeah, Jehovah's Witnesses can still marry in the courts, so they can still sign the paper, and I mean, according to Watchtower, that's perfectly acceptable. There's nothing wrong with that. So they're still able to freely worship. They're still able to freely preach, proselytize, and spread their horrific, backward-ass religion to other people. But they cannot marry other people. So yeah, in my opinion, this was a very, very slight punishment. But since Watchtower loves money so much, to them it's the end of the world. And as we saw in this Tony Morris video, which you should definitely check out if you haven't, Watchtower and the governing body are throwing a fuss about this and basically claiming that Norway is persecuting their members and they're coming after them.
In the future, various governments will challenge our freedom of worship. They may pressure us to change our scriptural beliefs, but we're certainly not going to do that.
And more European countries might do this in the future, which, to their credit, yeah, that might be the case. Not the persecution part, but I think more European governments could look at Norway and say, hey, we should actually stop giving money to Watchtower. I think that would be wonderful and the best Christmas present anyone could ask for. So yeah, that's the wrap, guys. Please check out the letter for yourself. I put the link in the description below. These are excellent news for religious freedom in Norway. We can say, pretty ironically, that Norway has disfellowshipped Watchtower from its money. It's so sweet to say this. Watchtower, you are no longer part of Norway's Subsidy Act. Get to the corner and keep crying. These legal battles are not over by any means, and you're gonna keep losing them, Tony. So drink up with that scotch. Again, thank you guys so much for watching. Check me out on Patreon and Instagram. Big thank you to my Patreon supporters. You guys are lovely. I couldn't do this without you. Now, we'll catch you on the next video. Have a lovely holiday and a happy new year.